Hey, it's Steve with Raybucks. You guys may have seen one of the last videos that we did on the rust release product that we just picked up recently. It's a rust removal liquid, non-toxic, biodegradable, really cool product. It's actually from a commercial and industrial background. A lot of large companies were using it to remove rust, light rust and rust scale from pipes when they were putting in large metal pipes for big plants or pipelines or anything like that. They would fill huge vats with rust release, dip the pipes in it, take it out, let it dry, and then ship it off to the job site. So we recently just brought this thing to market for like the automotive industry, and we thought it would be great to do a comparison against some of the more commonly used products that are on the market. A lot of you are probably familiar with the Evapo-rust. We have Metal Rescue, and then your plain up distilled white vinegar. So a lot of guys will use vinegar. It's been around obviously forever. Works really well for the most part. One of the issues with it though, it is acidic. So whenever you soak something in it, you have to watch how long it's in there for, and then when you take it out, you have to neutralize that acid. Typically with something like a baking soda mix. So you'd get baking soda, mix that up maybe with a little bit of water, clean the product off, rinse it, dry it, and then you'd be good to go. With these three products, they're non-acidic based, so literally you put the items in it, let it soak in it for whatever period of time you need to, take it out, and then either just let dry or rinse it first and then let dry. So with the Metal Rescue and the Evapo-rust, they say that you can rinse it. I think Evapo-rust recommends that you rinse with water first and then dry. With the Metal Rescue, it says that you can rinse it and then let it dry after that. With rust release, they don't care if you rinse it or anything. You don't have to do anything after the fact. The only reason I might actually rinse something is to help get off any of the blackness or the deposits that are left on the product or on the material. You can wipe it with a rag. You don't have to rinse it, so depending on what you're working with, you might want to squirt it off. You could use a high pressure or low pressure, or just wipe it with a rag. But you don't have to rinse it with water after the fact, which is a nice thing with the rust release. Again, you just let it dry and then clean it off, and you're ready to finish it if you want to prime it, paint it, whatever the case may be. So we're going to do a side-by-side comparison. All four of these products here, and we're going to put a bunch of different tools and stuff in it. I'm going to show you what the tools look like next. A lot of hand tools, sockets, that type of stuff that you might have laying around your garage. Now these products are really good for that type of stuff. You could use it with cutlery, you could use it with pretty much any type of tool, antiques like keys and lock sets and that type of stuff, cookware, motorcycle parts. There's all kinds of stuff you could use any of these products for. So again, we thought it'd be a real nice side-by-side comparison, especially since the rust release is such a new product to the market. Now, one of the caveats with Metal Rescue, they say to have the temperature at 68 degrees or warmer when you use it, and whenever you're soaking a product, they want you to cover the vat that you have it in so that it doesn't evaporate. That's the only product of the four that says that. For Evapo-rust, it says to use it at 65 degrees or warmer. It doesn't say anything about covering it. With rust release, there is no limitation within reason for temperature. So like I said, we're just going to do it side by side and see what happens. Right now in the garage, it's about 57 degrees. So it is lower than what these two products recommend. Typically, I keep my garage at like 50. The last time I used rust release, I used it when it was 50 degrees and had no issues with it. It worked really well. The other difference between these, with the Metal Rescue, they recommend anywhere between, I think, 2 and 12 hours soaking something. On the Evapo-rust, it was anywhere between an hour and 24 hours, depending again on the level of rust. Rust release is similar. Typically, it's anywhere between 15 minutes and 24 hours. Again, if it's something very lightly rusted, you just leave it for a shorter period of time, check on it every so often, and then take it out. Because with any of these products, any four of the products, if you leave the item in too long, it's going to start to turn black. So the products will eventually start to eat into the or affect the surface of the material that you're working with. The vinegar solution could affect chrome as well, and paint and rubber, where these three products will not. You can have, and you'll see what with some of the tools we're going to use, rubber grips on maybe a pair of pliers, paint that's on something, a wooden handle, a brass fitting, whatever the case may be. We're going to try those in each one of these and see what happens. And like I said, we're going to put it all in here, and we're going to probably check it every 15 minutes. So I'll put the products in here, we'll put the camera on it, we'll check it every 15 minutes, and we're going to see how it does. And then at the end, we'll do a comparison. You guys can make a decision for yourself which product you think might be the best for your needs. And here are the tools that we'll be using for some of the different solutions. As you can see, we got a couple different things down here. We got some files, old wrenches, bolts, snips. There's a head of a hammer, some robo-grip pliers. They have the rubber grips on them, so we're sticking that whole thing in there. Wood chisel, some regular pliers. You can see they're still pretty crusty. Snips, same thing. Got the rubber handles. We're throwing those whole things in there. Got some old squares. This one actually has the bubble level in it. Another old square up there with the wooden handle and some brass fittings on it, some sockets. I think this is an old caliper. Had this in the garage. I'm not sure where it came from, so it'll be interesting to see what that cleans up like. A bunch of old wrenches and some sockets. This socket set looks like someone maybe left open and it got rained on or water poured on it. Something happened to it. You can see they're pretty rusted. These sockets up here, if you look inside, you can see they're pretty rusty. This one's completely rusted all the way around. So different levels of rust. Some chrome, some not chrome. So we'll see how those do in the different solutions. Typically, when you put anything chrome in like a vinegar solution for a long time, there's a chance that the chrome, if it's not a good chrome plating, the chrome could start peeling off. So we'll see what that does, and we'll see what the other solutions do to all these. So here are the solutions and what they look like when before we put any tools or anything in them, other than the rust release, which is the first one. It does start off a yellow color. This is the second time I've used this particular container. I did use it in one of the last videos to soak some tools and that one jack, that Model T jack. So you can see it is getting a little bit darker, but it's not a whole lot darker than it was. The Evapo-rust has a real slight tinge to it, and then the Metal Rescue and obviously the vinegar don't have anything. They just look clear, like a clear liquid. All three of these products in the front work in a similar fashion, or notify you in a similar fashion as to how often they can be reused or how long they can be reused. They will eventually start to turn black, and you'll notice that it just doesn't work anymore. So we'll see again how that goes, or how the colors change in all of these as the tools are soaking in them. But again, I want to show you what they look like before we started. Okay, I'm going to start placing the tools in the different solutions here. And like I said, we're going to let these sit for about 15 minutes to start with, and then we'll take them out and see what happens. Okay, there we go. All set, all tools are in. We're going to give it 15 minutes. We'll come back, check on it, and then every 15 minutes after that we will check on it. One thing I didn't touch on before is disposal of all of these. Since they are biodegradable, it's a lot easier to dispose of than anything that's acid-based. A lot of it depends though on local ordinances wherever you live, and the iron content that is left in the solution when it's all done doing its magic. So once you filter the iron content out, which you could probably just filter with like a typical strainer, like a paint strainer or something, then again, check your local ordinances, regulations on what you can do with this. Typically these can be flushed down the drain, so it's pretty easy to take care of or to deal with, but again, double check with the local authorities first. Okay, it's been 15 minutes, so we're going to check out and see how things are looking in the different vats here. We'll start with the Zero Rust. We'll pull this little square out of here, give it a little wipe, and see what it looks like. Actually, I don't know if you could really see it from this angle, but it has removed the majority of the rust that was on this. Now this wasn't heavily rusted, but still rusted enough that, that you could see it all and you could feel it. Just slide that out of the way. Yeah, actually 15 minutes and this one's done. So I'm going to let that set right there. I'll get back to it. Let me look at the square that was in this one. This was the Metal Rescue. Take a look at the square that was in here. Pretty good. Actually did a pretty decent job. There's still a little bit of rust on it, but it did take a fair amount off. I'm going to put that one back in for a little bit. The bubble, the little plastic bubble, or maybe it's glass because this is pretty old, I don't know, doesn't look to be affected at all, so that is good. Let's take a look at some other stuff, maybe some stuff that, oh, here we go, this is a good one. These snips. These actually cleaned up really well after 15 minutes. I'm going to wipe these off. Get a little bit closer. These actually look almost new. Well, they look used still, but they are nice. So those are, ooh, they actually even feel a little bit better, but really nice. Okay, so that was 15 minutes in that, and let's look at these ones in the Evapo-rust. These ones are still pretty heavily rusted. So let me see if I can get you a closer up. I'll bring them up to the camera so you can see them. That's 15 minutes in either one. These looked almost identical rust-wise when I put them in the solutions. This one was the one that was in the rust release for 15 minutes. This one was the one that was in the Evapo-rust for 15 minutes. So definitely going back in. Get that back under there. Whoop, that little rag just fell down in there. Okay, let's see what else we have in here. It's pretty heavily rusted. Oh, let's take a look at the sockets. So we'll take this socket out. This is one of the chromed sockets. Actually, they probably all were chromed at some point. It has turned, the chrome itself is fine, and it has turned the rust that was on the inside black. So it is fairly black. It's hard to see, I know, but it is fairly black. We're just going to take that one out because it looks like that's fine. We do have some sockets in here. Let's see what this one looks like. Again, chrome looks fine on this one. Let's take a look at the inside of it. Let's wipe it out. This one actually still shows a fair amount of rust on the inside, so I'm going to plop it back in. We'll take a look at one of these ones in here. Again, the chrome looks fine. Let's wipe out the inside, see what the inside looks like. This one wasn't as heavily rusted as those other ones. It was more just on the inside here, and it wasn't too bad from water sitting inside of it. Looking inside of it, it's black, but there is still a little bit of rust, so we're going to pop that one back in. And we'll pull one out of the vinegar solution. Chrome still looks fine on this one after 15 minutes, and it is still rusted. Not even really black or anything, that one is just rusted. Now let's take a look at we'll look at the pliers, some of these other pliers that are in here. Or wrenches maybe. Let's take a look at this little wrench that was in here. This one was pretty heavily rusted. Let me wipe it off. And you could see the amount of, this was a fairly clean rag. Now it's all black. This little hand wrench has a little bit of rust on the end of it, but the majority of it is gone. It's just down to the black marks from where the rust was. I'm going to let that one sit out because it doesn't need to be in there anymore. This one, let me see here. This one wasn't very heavily rusted. Had just a little bit of rust on it. We'll wipe it off. See what this looks like. Okay. Yep, just down to the black. So the rust, the real light rust that was on this one is gone after 15 minutes. Now let's look at one that was a little more heavily rusted. This one was still pretty heavily rusted. Let's see. and there's still rust. It did take some of it off, but it's still pretty rusted. So we're going to just stick that one back down in the solution. Let's look at 2 of them that are in here. Yeah, this one still has a fair amount of rust. Has some black marks, some black markings on it, but still a fair amount of rust. This one I could tell is going to be the same way because I could actually see the reddish brown color where the rust is. We're going to stick that back in. Let's take a look maybe at the wood chisel. Had the plastic handle on it. Doesn't appear to have done anything to the handle. And there is still rust on the chisel part itself. And let's take a look at one of these ones. These ones were pretty heavily rusted. Very similar though. They were all, these old wrenches were all pretty similar in the amount of rust that was on them, except for maybe 2 of those light ones. And this is still very heavily rusted in the vinegar solution. So we're going to take that out. Yeah, I can still see rust on pretty much all of this stuff. So we're going to let all of this sit. We'll give it maybe another half an hour. So this was the first 15 minutes. We'll give it, actually now that I've been down here, it's been almost 10. So it's been about 25 minutes. We're going to give it a full hour. We're going to see after a full hour where this stuff sits and what it looks like and how everything worked. Okay, it's been an hour, so we're going to look at everything that's in here. Pull some stuff out and see where we are. So just looking at it, while everything's soaking in the liquids, the vinegar solution looks like it has hardly done anything. The other 3 solutions, you can see even the colors of the liquids are changing quite a bit. So we're going to pull these out and see what happens. First thing I'm going to do is look at this square. It was fairly rusted. This is the one that has the wooden handle on it. Looks like some brass fittings. Let's get this cleaned off. See what it looks like. Oh, it actually looks pretty nice. Again, you're going to see a lot of black marks where the rust was. That is natural, it's typical, it's what it should look like. And the more that I clean this thing off, the more of the dirt and the black stuff comes off. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier, if you have stuff that's heavily greased, heavily dirty or whatever, degrease it first. Try to get as much of the grease and oil off as you can prior to soaking it in any of these types of solutions, because they're really not meant to be cleaners like that. They're meant to be rust removers. So they're going to act with or against the rust that's on the metal surfaces. They're not going to do anything with oil and grease. So actually this one turned out pretty nice. You can see the brass, how it shined up. You can see it up here and on this side. And then this cleaned up fairly well. The top part of it cleaned up fairly well. So we're going to set that one aside. Let's go to some of the more heavily rusted items. So we had this pair of channel locks that was in there. Rubber handles look fine. Nothing happened to those. These ones actually, like I said, were pretty heavily rusted. It looks like it took the majority of it off, but there is still some rust. So the one side looks pretty good. The other side, there's still some, it was, I mean, you can see it, it's actually flaking off. It was scaled rust. That's how bad it was. So up on the head part, there was some light rust. That came off. It's just black now, but there's some heavy rust in the bottom. I'm going to stick that one back in there and let it go. You know what? We're going to do the bolts. These bolts were all rusted about the same amount. We'll get this one cleaned off. Holy cow, this thing actually looks like it's almost new. It took everything off of this. So there's that one. And I'll show them up close so you can see what the difference is. Let's get this one out of here. Again, this was after an hour of it sitting in the solution. I'm going to put them in line here and then I'll get them up close to the camera so you can see what it looks like out of each one. Again, anything you take out of the vinegar solution, you're going to want to neutralize. So I do have a little baking soda mix that I'll neutralize it with, and then I'll clean it off after that. Okay, so here I'm going to grab these ones and I'll show you the difference between them. So we have the rust release bolt, which looks almost brand new. A little bit of black mark on the heads. we have the Evapo-rust, which still, I mean, it looks mostly black, but it has a little bit of rust on the top of it. We have the Metal Rescue, which again cleaned up most of it, mostly just black on the top, so that's not too bad. And then the one that was in the vinegar solution, it actually still has some rust on it. So out of these, it looks like the rust release and the Metal Rescue did a slightly better job, but again, the Evapo-rust looks pretty good. But this one, again, that was in the rust release, looks like it's almost brand new. So we'll pull a few more things out of here, a few more tools, see what they look like. Here's that, holy cow. This is that micrometer, whatever this thing was. It wasn't heavily rusted, but fairly rusted. This thing, I don't know if you could pick up on it. It, again, looks pretty darn close to like new or clean metal. You can see there's definitely some black marks in it, but for the most part, it just took everything off of here. That is crazy. Let me get this one up close so you can see it too. Like, look at that. That's crazy. I'll finish cleaning it here in a little bit. And we'll get this really heavily rusted pipe wrench out of here, this old pipe wrench. This thing wasn't really moving that well either before. Get it cleaned off. And this one is just down to the black markings on it. I'll get it close so you can see it's still wet. I didn't do a good job of wiping it off, but you can see it's really just the black markings where the rust was. So looks like an hour in that solution, even at 57 degrees in the garage, no problem at all, took care of it. And again, this is the second time I've used this product. I used it on some other stuff that was pretty heavily rusted before, so it obviously does a good job. Take one of these, clean it off. This actually looks pretty decent. Just a lot of black markings on it from where the rust was. There's still some rust up in the end of it, so there's still a little bit of rust. I'm actually going to drop that one in rust release. We'll take one out of the Metal Rescue, clean it off, see what it looks like. I mean, look at the amount of stuff that's coming off these. This was, again, was just a completely blue rag when I started. We'll get this one wiped off. Okay, and it took the majority of it off. There is still some rust up here. The rest of this is mostly just black, so it actually did a pretty decent job. Again, I'm going to drop that one in the rust release. Let's take a look at these snips here. These have rubber handles. This was in the Evapo-rust. Or no, wait, this was in the Metal Rescue. Yep, it took everything off of this one. This one looks nice. It's nice and clean. So that one worked. Drop that down there. And we'll take a look at the square. Let's clean this off. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Again, just a bunch of black markings. Looks like didn't affect any of the whatever paint may have been on here. The bubble still works all fine in it. It didn't affect that at all. It just took longer to clean up and to get the rust off than what the rust release product did. And this one's actually interesting. I just slid it. I don't know if you can see it, but I just slid it down, and you can see there's still some rust markings underneath from where this was sitting. It was like that. Slid it down. So obviously it didn't penetrate enough. It wasn't soaking in the solution long enough, but it actually did a pretty good job. We'll pop that one back in here for a little bit and let it finish cleaning. Now let's try these Robo Grips. Rubber handles all look good. Still, the light rust, it took off down here, still heavy rust up on the top. Take a look at these sockets again. I'll pull one out of here. Chrome all looks fine. Yep, just black on the inside, so that did a nice job there. We'll leave that out for now. We'll take one of these out of here. Chrome all looks good. Yep, just black on the inside, so that's the way that it should be. Let's take a look at this chrome one. This was the vinegar solution. It is still rusted, so this is still rusted. So I'll go through, I'll clean all these up in a little bit. I'm going to take them out. I don't want to take up too much time on this video. I already took up enough time, but again, you can see the color difference in the liquids. The rust release is starting to get pretty dark, so it's probably getting close to being used up. We'll see though. I'm going to use it a few more times. The Evapo-rust is darker than it was, definitely darker than it was. It looks like it's been doing a decent job. The Evapo-rust is darker, slightly darker than it was. I've got to say, between the Evapo-rust and the Metal Rescue, it seems like the Evapo-rust, or sorry, between the Evapo-rust and the Metal Rescue, it seems like the Metal Rescue has been doing a better job with rust removal, based on, you know, looking at similar items that are in here, similar levels of rust. And the vinegar solution is not a good solution. I mean, it's just pure vinegar. It wasn't a constant, or wasn't mixed with anything, wasn't diluted. It's just not doing a good job. So yes, you can use vinegar. Obviously, it's just going to take a long time. In my opinion, the rust release was the best out of all of them, followed by the Metal Rescue and then the Evapo-rust. Those two seem to be pretty close, even below the temperatures that that they said that they should be used at. Still did a decent job. I don't know if you really need to put a lid or anything on top of the Metal Rescue, like it said. Maybe if you were letting it set overnight, or maybe if it was in a warmer environment where it would evaporate a little bit more. But in a cooler environment, it seems to be fine, not really do much of anything. So there you go. Like I said, I'm going to take all this stuff out, clean it up. But again, in my opinion, from what I've seen here across these 4 items, the rust release wins hands down. And here's what all the tools look like after we took them out of the solutions, wiped them all down. We have the rust release, the Evapo-rust, Metal Rescue, and the vinegar solution. I'll try to get a close-up view so you can kind of get a feel for what these look like. These were pretty heavily rusted. I mean, take a look at that bolt. This is the Evapo-rust bolt. This is the Metal Rescue bolt. And then there is the vinegar. Yeah, it's a pretty big difference. So there's all the Evapo-rust, the Metal Rescue, and then the vinegar. Again, this was all after only an hour in the solution. The vinegar, again, hardly did anything. Those tools are going to have to get soaked in something else. The Evapo-rust and the Metal Rescue did a nice job. The rust release just did a fantastic job, though. It was actually pretty unbelievable. And some of these tools, like this, that was done in 15 minutes. So there you go.